Hello, my friends, and welcome to the House of Good Spirit. Let me tell you, it is rare we see a sky like this for any full moon, let alone a full moon in Aquarius. As my favorite 2000s band would say, it's truly an oracular spectacular. Tell me who in the comments. If you don't know me, I'm Whitney Kranz, the astrologer behind Astro Arcana, and you can think of me as your mystic sis, your astro bestie, and let me tell you, it is my God-given duty to translate the otherworldly wisdom into down-to-earth insights. Here at the House of Good Spirit, this is a gathering place of community. It is where we share our hopes, our dreams, our wishes for the future, as we discuss working with our lunations, both our new moons and our full moons, and how we can integrate that planetary magic. Now, for the full moon in Aquarius happening on August 9th this month, like I alluded to, something really special is happening under this full moon. It is a rare moment when the entire sky is engaged, and everyone, I mean everyone, even the muggles and the normies, will feel it. So if you need help sorting through what all of this means for you, go book a transit reading with me. The link is in the description. Before we discuss Aquarius and the themes we're going to see for this new moon, you know what time it is. It's time to connect with our House of Good Spirit community. So today I have 3 guests, my astro besties, teed up for you, and they're all sharing stories from our full moon in Capricorn last month on July 10th. So first we have Louise. Y'all, you're not even gonna see her face, but I want you to hear her story. She has some great things to share. I know because she shared with me offline that she was recording this under the full moon on a solo beach camping trip somewhere on the coast of the UK where she lives. So let's hear from Louise, shall we?
Hi Whitney, sorry that it is dark, but I am under the Capricorn full moon. There she is. So I knew you'd appreciate and wouldn't mind. I'm really enjoying tonight and this moment. It feels to me very stable and very secure moment to think how far you've come and how capable you are and how strong the foundations and your inner self is after everything that's gone on over the past 18 months, 2 years. I've had Pluto on my, firstly obviously in Cap, the grand finale, and then straight away onto my sun, and let me tell you that shit went down. And then Jupiter in my 6th house was not fun. I absolutely hated it. So I was really glad when it went to my 7th house, which is my Jupiter return, which you know, and I was a bit skeptical because of the whole night chart thing. I've got a night chart and thought, oh, how good can it actually really be? But it has been great, especially in the last 2 weeks. The Venus and Uranus conjunct in Taurus in my 5th house was like a party. It really was. Loads of unexpected stuff happened, which was to be expected, but still unexpected. We all got the memo, but it still doesn't prepare you, I don't think. It was like a sudden, boom, this surprise, but then quick, you turn a corner and there's something completely different that you thought you already had the surprise, and here's another one, and here's how they link, and here's how, if you go back, it was working towards this. Probably not making any sense, but it was really fun. So yeah, tonight I'm just really happy that it's a chance to gather my thoughts back together. A bit like the day after a party when you sit down and you're like, oh my god, what just happened? This was great, but get me a cup of tea, get me a shower, let me think about what I've got to do and get ready for it. I am personally really excited about Uranus going into Gemini. I didn't think I would be, because I've just kind of had enough of all the fast air energy, but actually the difference that I am noticing is that, and it's really sudden, this sudden shift, and I don't want to use all these cliches, but it really is. It's like there's this inner excitement, and it's like a really youthful, fun excitement rather than like an anxious, intense, on the edge of your seat excitement. So yeah, I can't wait. I feel like AI is going to be, I mean, we all know AI is going to be the next thing, but I feel like it's going to be more fun than we anticipated. I love your channel. I can't wait to do what you do next. Love the fashion element of it. Please do more, and please let me know what your Pinterest name is, because I'd love to follow your boards. Anyway, good night from me. Happy for me.
Louise, thank you so much. First, I love to hear that the fashion stuff resonates with you. You know, it's such an important part of my life. And when I came into the astrology world, I was wondering if there was space in this incredibly philosophical, studious community for something as fun as fashion. And so it's great to hear that. All of you can find the link to my Pinterest boards in the description of the show notes. Now, just let me tell you, Louise, I love the vibe you set for that video. And y'all, Louise is a Capricorn rising, so she has gone through so much very personal transformation over the last, no big deal, 20 years while Capricorn was over her ascendant. And I know, girl, that sun Pluto is powerful. And I am so excited to hear, I mean, one, the transformation and the inspiration that you're feeling with Uranus into Gemini, but also the pure groundedness that you were able to experience over this full moon. What a beautiful culmination of all of the work that you've done personally. So thank you for sharing, and I'll talk to you soon. Next, we are going to feature Mary Tiana, who also has a not quite as uplifting, but very, very pertinent story around the Capricorn full moon.
On the full moon in Capricorn, I received an email from work saying that there would be budget cuts hospital-wide due to politics, and no one would be able to receive incentive pay work opportunities, which is just extra pay on top of like time and a half that you would receive from overtime when they're super understaffed for their shifts, various places in the placements in the hospital, and so that directly impacts my financial plan and health plan of like not burning myself out working overtime, but still working enough overtime to meet some debt payoff goals and like to save up for a car so that I don't have to use anybody else's. And yeah, so that is Capricorn 6th house for me. I'm a Leo rising, also a Cap sun, and my Saturn is natally in my 8th house. So yeah, astrology good.
Oh, Mary Tiana, at least you've got the astrology good thing. And doesn't it help as people who understand astrology to understand that some of these circumstances that happen, it's not that they're not within our control, but it helps us place a reason why. And I know for me, that really helps when I'm going through a hard time, because I know that this is just part of the fabric of life. And the great thing is that life moves in cycles. But for a Capricorn full moon in your 6th house, I'm first of all sorry, that totally sucks. Like, I know we make these financial plans and assume that the situation is guaranteed. And this obviously was some sort of like rude wake up that we don't even want. But the 6th house, you know, if the audience doesn't know, the 6th house is a place of work and a place of toil. It makes sense, of course, to see an excess of effort in order to make the same amount of money. But I do hope that that changes for you, that we come around and your situation changes. Thank you so much for sharing, Mary Tiana, and let us know how it goes. Also, we have to compliment your amazing makeup, your accessories, your outfit. Y'all, Mary Tiana told me that she was literally on the way to a Beyonce concert when she sent in this video. How awesome is that? I hope you had such a great time, girl. Let's close out our community section with Taylor.
Hey, Whitney. For the full moon in Capricorn, I worked 4 jobs today, but I got a new job. It's a 9 to 5, and I'm very excited about it. The job hunt to get this job was so brutal. It took 6 months. I was rejected many times. And this team is like my dream team. So I'm really hopeful about this job. I just got the first paycheck and I deposited it in my account. So it was really like a day where I really hope I can stay somewhere long term, because I've worked many jobs and they did not always go well and I did not enjoy many of them. So I'm really hoping this is going to be the exception and that I can stay there a long time and make a positive impact. So yeah, that was my big takeaway from this full moon. Otherwise, I got my car work done and just practical things done. Very grounding kind of energy. Thanks.
Taylor, congrats on your dream job, dream team. That is so exciting. Isn't it interesting how, despite the difference in circumstance, we see a theme of work? Remember when we were talking about the Capricorn full moon? And I think I showed that gif that you better work, that's so Capricorn. Capricorn makes us work for a purpose, but we're also hearing those themes of groundedness. After all, Capricorn is an earth sign. Taylor, I'm so thrilled for you that you've made this transition. I mean, it doesn't sound fun to work 4 jobs, but I know you got to do what you got to do. Hopefully, with the addition of this new job with your dream team, you're able to let a couple of those extra gigs go, right? Well, thank you all for sharing. And if you yourself want to share a story of how this full moon in Aquarius is affecting you, any of the other transits happening throughout the sky, August is a big month. Please share your story with me. I really do want to hear them. Send me a about minute-long video straight to my Instagram DMs, and I would be so happy to feature you in a future episode. So with that, now that we're feeling good with our community, let's talk about Aquarius. We'll do a little bit of a deep dive here before we get into the overall context of the sky that I told you about and what it all means. So Aquarius, raise your hand if you're a fellow weirdo, a fellow eccentric, an oddball. Guys, it's our time. Now, Aquarians are contrarians. They're the underdogs of the zodiac. They are socially detached and yet somehow still so invested in community. Aquarius is the sign with a vision. And boy, do they have the dedication to pull it off, but also the skill to do so. And as an Aquarius, it is our responsibility to evolve, to progress, to lead the way and let others follow. I say all this we because I myself am an Aquarius sun. Aquarius is an air sign and a fixed sign. Just like we talked about Leo at the last lunation, because Leo and Aquarius are part of that same dyad, opposite from one another on the zodiac wheel, they are both fixed signs. But where Leo is fire, Aquarius is air. And air signs lend to curiosity, intellect, ideas. But you're like, Whitney, it's the water bearer. Isn't Aquarius a water sign? No, people. Aquarius is an air sign. I can't tell you how many people I've met in my life who, when I say, or, they ask my sign and I say, oh, I'm an Aquarius, they say, oh, a water sign like me. I'm a Cancer. And so then we have to talk about, no. Aquarius is actually an air sign, even though water is represented in its glyph, in its constellation, all of the above. You want to hear just a quick aside? Isn't this funny? I actually went on a date with a guy who said basically those exact words to me. Oh, I'm a Cancer. You're an Aquarius. You're a water sign, just like me. You know, it didn't last very long. So the water thing, what it means is that Aquarius is a vessel for the water. They carry the water, but they are not of the water. It is like containing the life force, but to translate it rather than to absorb it or be it. Now, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, and it's actually the detriment of the sun. And isn't it interesting? Aquarius is one of only 4 signs in the zodiac that doesn't have an exaltation or fall. But what's interesting about Aquarius is that it's actually Saturn's second sign. And now, isn't that some sort of sick cosmic joke that there are 2 Saturn signs placed right in a row in the zodiac? I say that because remember we talked about Capricorn last month. Capricorn is also Saturn ruled, and Aquarius comes right after Capricorn and is also Saturn ruled. Now, We laugh about that sick joke, right? But really, if you think about it, it makes sense. Think about the work that Saturn makes us do. It is a process of growth. And so there's something about these two Saturn signs in a row that's so symbolic of the growth journey of Saturn. The other interesting thing about that, both of these Saturn ruled signs, Capricorn and Aquarius, is that both luminaries are in their detriment, or they don't do so well in Saturn ruled signs. It is that quintessential light and dark that we talked about in our last episode. And so basically what that means is that the sun in detriment in Aquarius and the moon in detriment in Capricorn, the sun has to play by Saturn's rules. The sun's light becomes dimmed in this place of Aquarius. Now, as a reflective entity, the moon plays a little bit better in this realm. But let's pull on that thread that Saturn gives us. Because if we're talking about the differences in Saturn ruled signs between Saturn and Aquarius, we know that Capricorn has Mars as its exaltation. Aquarius doesn't have an exaltation at all. And the way I think about it is like this. When Capricorn reaches the summit, remember they are bearing this weight of responsibility. It is a way of climbing the mountain. Life for Capricorn represents a sheer force of effort. So when Capricorn reaches the summit of their climb, the summit of that mountain, what do they see at the top? That's how I think of Aquarius, because when you get to the top of that summit, you look out over the terrain, you see this vision. Aquarius is a visionary, right? You have perspective and a view from above. You recognize all of the pieces of life that make it work. You see the humanity, you see animals, you see the earth represented. And from this perspective, we're filled with a sense of awe, of course, but also a sense of care. When you see that beauty, if you've ever climbed to the top of a mountain, short or tall, you know that feeling, right? That feeling of awe. And this is what the work of Saturn is for. So isn't it interesting? Capricorn is almost like the traditional work of Saturn, and Saturn in Aquarius is like a different way of getting that work done, the road less traveled, and the perspective that that brings us. Now, there is also an association with Aquarius of this outsider. So many people use the word detachment, and I think that's a really apt description for the sign of Aquarius generally. Now, we know that Saturn, as the furthest planet in ancient times, ancient astrologers could only see so far as Saturn. Our three outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, weren't discovered until hundreds and hundreds of years later, right? And so as the furthest planet in the ancient solar system, Saturn represented the furthest away, the outsider. This sounds a little crazy, okay? But I think you'll understand what I'm getting at. As an outsider, there is something that binds us to others, if purely in the way that we recognize that we are part of or apart from a whole. And so when we mentioned earlier that Aquarius is opposite Leo, and we think about this Leo-Aquarius dyad, the opposites, the sun versus Saturn, we think here of self versus others, or like supreme power versus the collective. These questions often come up in both Aquarian and Leonine ideals. Now, some of you may be asking, well, what about Uranus? I've heard all about Uranus, and Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, and isn't that where we get the inventiveness and the eccentricity from? Yes and no. I practice Hellenistic astrology, and in Hellenistic astrology, we do not recognize the outer planets as having rulerships to the signs. That's not to say there are not ways that Uranus absolutely aligns with and has commonalities with the theme of Aquarius, but it's not not fair to say that Uranus is a ruler of Aquarius, despite it having certain affinities with it. Now, like I said, there are themes that fit. Think of like rebellion, bucking the status quo. But if we think critically about that, we can just as well see those themes, rebellion, bucking the status quo, as the airy, more idealized, more intellectual version of Saturn, a planet of outsiders, right? And so when the outsider has ideas about ways to do things, that can incite a rebellion or create a difference with what the norm is. So you know a little bit about Aquarius, but I said at the beginning of this episode that something special is happening here in the sky. So let's talk about the context around this full moon. Literally every single planet in the sky is engaged at this time. This is pretty rare. So let me show you what I mean here. The full moon means that the moon in Aquarius is opposing the sun in Leo. Now that happens on August 9th at about 3 a.m. Central Time here in the US. Now, the ruler of this full moon, like we just talked all about, is Saturn. Saturn is retrograde and conjunct Neptune retrograde. Now, here's the kicker, and this is where it gets really interesting. Both Saturn and Neptune at this time are opposite Mars in Libra, and they're both sextile Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini. On top of that, that was already a lot, right? Mercury, who is still retrograde in Leo, but only for 2 more days. Mercury is currently opposing Pluto at the early degrees of Aquarius, and Mercury is actually right now still within the same degree in which it will turn retrograde, signaling like a turn of events, right? Now, that's not all, folks. Venus and Jupiter, even though they're not really in aspect here to anybody else, Venus and Jupiter are conjoined. So they're in aspect to each other, and they're both conjoined in Cancer. So how on earth do we delineate this? How on earth can we say what all of this means when every planet is involved? Honestly, you don't. Like, think about it this way. Okay, you know the movie Love Actually? It's kind of like that. There are all of these individual storylines happening, and you realize by the end of the story that they're all connected in some way, but you don't really understand all of the connections until that story has been told. And so that's the way I'm thinking of this huge formation in the sky that's happening. But let me tell you this. Now, when we talked about Saturn, Neptune, Mars in an opposition, with Saturn and Neptune both sextiling Uranus and Pluto, with Uranus, Pluto, and Mars all engaged in a trine, this is what we call a kite aspect. And you can plainly see the shape that this creates when we draw those sight lines to each other. Now, listen, a kite formation is one that is incredibly supportive. Think about how a kite, especially one that's lofted by air. A kite, you go fly a kite, you need a little wind for it to take off, for it to fly. I'm picturing what's happening here with this kite formation as a metaphor of soaring to new heights. But there are some challenges that deserve attention. Like, I'm not going to just glaze over the fact that Mars and Saturn, especially in an opposition, is not an easy aspect. Isn't it interesting, though, the way a kite is formed? We have that opposition in the center. An opposition is an aspect that is the nature of Saturn. It tests our limits. It provides structure. The other aspects involved here, 3 trines we talked about, right? With Uranus, Pluto, and Mars. Now, trines are the nature of Jupiter. And so very simply, we can think of, just like Jupiter is a benefic, we can think of a trine as an aspect that is helpful overall and represents growth. Jupiter is growth and abundance. Now, we also have 2 sextiles here. So sextiles are the nature of Venus, another benefic. And we know that Venus is a planet of harmony. She's a god of pleasure. And so when we put this together with a kite representing growth, harmony, and at the same time testing our structures, right? That is overall very positive. These planets are sort of reflecting and synergizing with one another to be lofted to new heights. It is optimistic. That said, I think that at this time, over this new moon, we can certainly have those Mars-Saturn feelings of exhaustion. You know, when you have made such progress on a project that you are incredibly happy with the results, but you're also exhausted. You're feeling raw, maybe a little bit like ripped open, but ready. And I've felt the workings of a kite aspect personally. Actually, this spring, I experienced one by transit. So it was planets in the sky were forming a kite aspect to some of my natal planets by transit. And it was under this formation that I had this incredibly pivotal experience of going to my first astrology conference, of meeting all of these amazing people, some of them you out there, forming not only this sense of community, but this sense of growth. And look how far we can go. It's one of those things where, like, you know you'll never be the same. And there is this sense of, with Pluto, Uranus, and Mars combined, it's like an explosive combination of bursting forth. It's like a rocket launch. We're clear for takeoff. Like, I could rename this aspect as the rocket, because that is really what is being told by all of these planets engaged. And, you know, I don't want to romanticize it too much. I hope you're getting the double nature of what's happening here, because it's not to say that with Mars, Pluto, Uranus, Saturn involved, that it's not going to be loud and messy, right? That, like, an explosion is loud and messy, right? But it is a rapid change. It clears the way for growth. But let's remember as well that at this time, Venus and Jupiter are conjoined in Cancer in this incredibly beautiful and fertile place. Our benefics coming together is really a joyful, abundant, pleasure-filled moment. If there's any word of warning about Jupiter and Venus conjoined together, it's just like maybe a little excess, maybe a little bit too fun. So you can have a reminder to temper that. But I think that this Venus-Jupiter conjunction happening at the same time that this kite formation is forming, that we have this beautiful full moon in Aquarius, is really going to bring some sense of lightness and pleasure and a realization of where this moment is taking us. Now, I just want to mention as well that where Saturn and Neptune are right now in that opposition to Mars, this is where Saturn and Neptune will also conjoin next February. And so just like anything in astrology, we live in cycles. In astrology, we follow the spiral path. And so what I'm seeing here is that this is a vision. Remember, Aquarius is visionary. This is a vision of what we can create if we keep the faith, if we keep walking that path that Saturn and Neptune has put us on in our unique charts. So I know that was a lot of context, but I really wanted to give enough weight to what is happening in the sky right now, because it's no little thing. And like I mentioned, from a long-range vision perspective, this feels really important, but in the meantime, it might not be so comfortable. It might even hurt a little bit, right? With Aquarius as the sign that represents the collective, I can really see those themes here. And that actually takes us perfectly into the portion where we kind of put all of this together. We put the Aquarius symbolism together with the context of the sky and talk about what this full moon means for us. So remember, a full moon is a moment of culmination. It's a moment of becoming, right? And we've already talked a little bit. I just mentioned that sort of like collective reckoning piece. But what I'm thinking of, any other 90s kids out there who loved the show Captain Planet? the cartoon. That was one of my top. I was so lucky that my grandparents had Cartoon Network. So anytime I would go to their house as a kid, I would watch Captain Planet. Scooby-Doo is my other favorite. Oh, you know, I loved Powerpuff Girls. Isn't it funny that all of these cartoons we watched as children were like this group of young, motivated individuals ready to solve a problem? Like, think about what that did for us growing up. It's so interesting to think about. I mean, all of that is very Aquarian in general, but Captain Planet, okay? It was these 5 kids from all across the globe. Each one represented an element. And these kids were chosen by the Earth Mother Gaia. See why I love it? They were chosen by Gaia to hold special elemental powers. There was one of Earth, fire, wind, and water. And you're like, Whitney, what's the 5th element? It's heart, okay? How beautiful is that? So these 5 kids, all representing these 5 elements, would go beat the environmental baddies, okay? So it was all in an effort to stop pollution, etc. And when the going got a little too tough for these 5 kids, they would call in Captain Planet, and they would put their rings together and they would say, with our powers combined, we can make a difference. And isn't that so beautifully Aquarian? And it's part of what I'm seeing with all of these planets convening to arrange something special collectively for us. I see it as a collective reckoning. And before I move on from this like total trip down the lane that is nostalgia, I just want to talk a little bit more about what that means and the specialness that is represented in that 5th element of heart. Here we are in this metaphor in a very Aquarian way, using our unique gift. That's each of those elements. These kids, that was their unique gift. And so, like the water bearer, we carry this vessel of our own unique contribution toward a new future. In elaboration with this feeling of what Captain Planet gives us, with our powers combined, we can make a difference. We're seeing that as this moment of power to the people, or in a way, the return of the underdog. The underdog wins. I think that many of us, as part of a greater collective right now, are feeling like the underdog, are feeling like we don't have the individual capacity for what it takes to overcome challenges of, let's just call it what it is, fascism, this supreme power that has been placed in front of us in the US, yes, and so many other areas of the world. And so when I think about Aquarius and Saturn as the outsider, that's where we get this underdog theme. But doesn't everybody love an underdog story? It is when we combine together as the collective underdog to put our effort forth with our unique gifts to give to others, that is when the underdog wins. We can kind of pull on this thread of the underdog theme and talk about the myth of Aquarius, the constellation of Aquarius. Aquarius is represented by the myth of Ganymede. Now, Ganymede, as a youth, abducted by Zeus in his eagle form. Do we have a count out there of how many Zeus abductions happened? Like, I know he's the god and all, but the god of gods, but how many people did he abduct against their wills, okay? Now, Ganymede was made to serve as cupbearer to the gods on Olympus, right? Cupbearer, water bearer. And so Ganymede, as this beautiful youthful boy, lived his life in service to the gods. Ganymede is one of few mortals out there who, because of his service, was elevated to an immortal status. That is why he is our representative of the water bearer, of the sign of Aquarius. And there's something we learn about Aquarius from the story of Ganymede, and that is the service aspect, that Aquarius is happy to serve their gods, happy to serve their collective for the greater good. Manilius was a Roman astrologer and poet from the 1st century. We're talking like year 14, okay? And Manilius wrote some very, very pivotal works a key text called the Astronomica. He wrote them right around this time. And Manilius said of Aquarius that Aquarius is a gentle sort, a lovable breed with no meanness in their hearts. And I think that this also illustrates that Ganymede story beautifully, this sort of openness and willingness to serve and love others. Now, what else did Manilius say about Aquarius? So listen, let's level set for a second, because while Manilius's Astronomica is one of our key texts, we know Manilius was a poet. Sometimes poets flourish or get a little sensationalized. We also know the times are different, right? I don't take everything written by Manilius as the one true word. It's actually interesting because whereas many ancient astrologers really delineated the signs' meanings based on planets, which if you haven't gathered, that's what I do, that's what we do in Hellenistic astrology, Manilius in Astronomica makes no mentions of the planets at all. He's only delineating signs. So I do wonder if there were some liberties taken, especially as I read through some of the signs that are rather harshly judged. But it is one of our earliest documentations on the signs, and so we take this to heart. What Manilius really drives home about the sign of Aquarius is a development of skills and abilities. Remember our unique gifts, right? And so his flourishing words in the Astronomica state something like this, like Aquarius is a youthful waterman who divines springs from under the ground, who transforms the flow of water, who mocks the sea with man-made shores. Now, that's all a lot about water, right? But we have to remember that in ancient times, water was the thing of life. Hell, it still is. And so the ability to divine water, to find it and manipulate it, was a key technology in ancient times. So that is where we can see the association of Aquarius with technology, without, of course, conflating Aquarius purely with Uranus as its ruler. So with this idea of technology, I think one of the other things beyond sort of this collective reckoning, beyond the underdog winning, is realization of technical prowess, this realization of intelligence. It's a realization of the skills we have cultivated in order to get the work done that we need to do. Within these themes of skill recognition, of an achieving underdog, of a collective realization, I think that what this comes down to is a rebirth or the marking of a fresh start. And listen, I know, you're like, Whitney, isn't making a new start what we do at the new moon and this is a full moon? Yes, that is true. But there's a reason why, specifically with this one, I mean, we talked about all of the context around it with all of these planets engaged in the sky. There is another reason why this feels like a fresh start. And that has to do with, even though Aquarius doesn't have an exaltation and a fall, just like every other sign in the zodiac, it is split up into areas that give us even more context about that particular place of the zodiac. And so at about 16 degrees Aquarius, we find this full moon in the decan of Mercury and the bound of Jupiter. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. But just very broadly, each sign is split into 3 equal decans that have a particular planetary rulership and 5 unequal bounds that have a different particular, or sometimes the same, planetary rulership. Now, in this middle decan, this what we say the second decan of Aquarius, it is ruled by Mercury. And so all of the things we talked about skill developments, all of the very airy signatures of intellect and ideas that we talked about, this is compounded by the fact that this full moon happens in Mercury's decan. Now, decans we correlate to the minor arcana cards of the tarot. And in tarot, this decan of Aquarius relates specifically to the 6 of Swords card. And you can see that this card portrays a figure ferrying folks who look like they need help to safety. It is a card of extraction, of removing oneself from a situation that is no longer working. It is also, because it is Mercury, a card of resourcefulness and creative problem solving. You know, you leave a place simply to have a new start, right? And this is further represented in the tarot by the Star card, which is Aquarius's major arcana correspondence. And the Star card is a card of hope and faith in oneself, faith in the greater universe. And isn't that beautiful? Because I mentioned that this lunation is happening in the bound of Jupiter. Jupiter is truly a planet of faith. And so, like Aquarius gives us perspective, this is a time where we recognize how far we've come, all we've sacrificed, what we've done in service to get here to this moment, that we have poured our skills and abilities, we have honed our craft, and we have made it this far, if only so that we can keep going, keep walking on that spiral path. Now that we know more about all of the meaning and special quality that this full moon in Aquarius contains, how do we integrate it, right? For me, I truly believe reflection and integration is key to working with our lunations. So as we talk about the cycles of astrology, it's important that we look back. This is a full moon, and there was a corresponding new moon back in January 2025, late January. Think back to January 29th. It was the new moon in Aquarius this year. What seeds were you planting then that you're realizing now? I'll share just another quick little story here that under this Aquarius new moon, here's an excerpt from my journal. I want to make my own fucking podcast. I literally wrote those words, expletives included. I curse like a sailor. Isn't it interesting then that on this Aquarius new moon, I was dreaming of what the house of good spirit would be. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but here I am releasing my 4th episode. It was really interesting because in the week that followed that, last week of January, first week of February, it was also my solar return. And that was when I realized that if I want to do this, if I want to create the podcast, if I want to be a full-time astrologer, that I would need to leave my full-time corporate job in order to do those things. And now here we are sitting, astrology is my full-time gig. So it's pretty cool when we reflect like that. So check out your journal, check out your photos, your emails, etc. But how else beyond thinking back specifically to that time can we reflect? Let's talk about collaboration, that collective community aspect. How are you making a difference with your collaborative projects? What is the difference that you want to make in the world, and how are you moving toward it? Where in your life do you feel like the underdog? If you've been feeling down on yourself, remember the underdog story. What would it look like if the underdog actually wins? And we all have unique gifts. What are yours? If you don't know, ask a friend or a partner. How do you display those gifts in your daily life? And finally, what skills have you developed? Where can you be of service with your unique skill set? Now, beyond getting in our heads and in our journals, there are practical integrations that we can take. Call them rituals if you like, but I live by the rule that rituals do not have to be complicated, okay? So in a practical way of integrating this full moon, get involved in your community, volunteer, perform an act of service, donate money in whatever amount you can to a cause. On a lighter note, see some live music. Like, is there nothing more Aquarian than cutting loose in a crowd of humans, free from judgment, a singular person apart and yet still one with the crowd? Go see a show, have fun with this. You could also go thrift shopping, right? You could exercise in a way that pinpoints the ankles and the calves, which are correlated with Aquarius. So do some stair climbers, do a bar class, right? I think what we could all use a dose of is practicing under this lunation some healthy detachment. Turn off your phone for a day. It's as simple as that, right? Turn off your phone and turn inward. Now, I also believe that style, fashion is one of the best ways that we can integrate the astrology. So what are we wearing during this cycle? What are you wearing under this new moon? I really like dark colors for Aquarius, think about Saturn, right? Blacks, just other neutrals in general, even the juxtaposition of black and white I love. I also love that for Libra, and isn't that funny? Saturn is Libra's exaltation. Anyway, we could also go down the route of the Aries sign, right? Bright blues, neon greens, a touch of something radical like paint your nails a neon green for the week and see how that feels. And honestly, if you've been contemplating on dyeing your hair like a rainbow unicorn, now's the time. Well, actually, please wait until Mercury turns direct on the 11th to do any crazy changes with your hair, okay? But in this cycle, if you've been contemplating, you know, that rainbow coif, go do it. I could also see in that aspect of bucking the status quo, like throw on a badass leather jacket. It's counterculture, it's punk rock, make it vintage, you know, and with that, sustainable fashion choices are a great option for community ecologically minded Aquarius. So that's the whole thrift shopping piece of it. You could also get into the upcycled fashion trend. Have you seen there are designers out there who take like old t-shirts, cut them up and make them into something totally new? That is so Aquarian. And like, let's just make it a conversation piece, right? Make it something to talk about. So as you are breaking your fashion norms, you are living through this wild and divine middle of August, I want to hear about it. Somebody show me your outfit. Show me how you're living and integrating the Aquarius full moon. And if you have a story about your own astrology and the way that this lunation is hitting, please let me know. I want your video in my DMs. You know how to find me on Instagram. The link is in the description. And you know what else is in the description? A link to book a reading with me. Listen, beyond seeing your videos, I want to meet you too. I take a reflective and integrative approach. You can see that in my work here. So if you like this content, you will love a reading. A reading with me is truly consultative. It is a two-way street. It is a conversation. So whether it's once a year on your birthday or once a month with my personal recommendations based on your birth chart for living and integrating under these skies, I would love nothing more than to help you down that spiral path. With that, I am wishing you all a beautiful full moon in Aquarius, and I will see you next time in the House of Good Spirit.